Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Song of Horror. It's a game that draws some heavy inspiration from good old titles like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, Fatal Frame, Alone in the Dark, and Amnesia. If you know any of these, you will feel right at home with this indie gem. And for anybody who didn't grow up with these games, don't worry. You will start to like this game without the need of nostalgia goggles because it easily has enough ideas on its own to entice you. For instance, Song of Horror is an episodic survival horror game. The game itself is made out of 5 different chapters through which the entire story runs through. Your main character is Daniel Neuer, an ex-alcoholic who works at a book publishing company. The year is 1998 and one of the biggest authors of the decade is Sebastian P. Huscher. Only problem is, he has gone missing and now it's Daniel's job to look for his client. So Daniel drives out to the Huscher mansion and right on arrival it is clear that the house has been abandoned for quite a while now. The only sign of life seems to be a melody that can be heard throughout the house.
Is that someone playing a music box?
And as Daniel goes looking for the source, he finds a letter addressed to Huscher. The letter mentions a peculiar music box that plays the most wondrous melody. Once heard, it gets stuck in your head forever. Investigating the house further reveals that the music must come from behind a door that should technically not even exist. Nevertheless, the brave lad that he is, he walks through it and... would you look at that? It's his birthday and it was all just a prank set up by his co-workers. Just kidding, the door shuts behind him and he goes missing for several days as well, trapped in a room with no way out. It is only by a miracle that Daniel is found and saved, spending the next days in the hospital. But what Daniel doesn't know yet is that he is locked in a fight with a presence that now yearns for his soul. And judging by the nightmares he has and the melody he constantly hears in his head, its influence over him is not broken at all.
Where am I?
It's no surprise that Song of Horror is a survival horror game, but not in the way you think. Lots of similar games give you the option to fend off your assailants by brute force, but here you can't fight the entity that haunts you. You would have to be Lucky Luke to do that, but he's not here. So the only survival tactics you have at your disposal are running away and your ability to think on the fly. First of all, you pick a character at the beginning of the episode. And then, just like in ye olde video games, you walk around the area, scan your environment for interesting things which are usually highlighted so you can't miss them. Over the course of the game, you're able to find lots of interesting stuff. Most of it is just fluff that fleshes out the world a bit more on that later, and then there are the usual key items and documents you will find. There are also a lot of puzzles in the game that require the items you found. You know, standard adventure procedure. The puzzles themselves range from pretty simple to real brain teasers. Sometimes you just need to find a key to open a door, but some of those puzzles require you to really stress your brain cells, as the solution will not be handed to you on a silver platter. I would say it's almost on par with the insanely difficult Silent Hill puzzles which require you to know your Shakespeare on the higher difficulty level. Since this is a game that takes several pages out of the classics of horror you know and love, we should discuss which pages are borrowed as well. Let's start with the old 90s features first and then work our way up to the unique stuff. As you can see straight away, the game works with fixed camera angles. As soon as the protagonist leaves the room or is out of sight, the angle changes so that he or she can stay in focus. This mechanic led to a lot of discussions ever since its inception, which was, correct me if I'm wrong, in Alone in the Dark. The downside is of course that the player has no control over the environment and can't see what is directly ahead of him or her. This can technically lead to getting hurt or running into a trap because the danger simply didn't show up until the corner was cut. Even back then, some players just felt restricted by this mechanic, and in today's gaming environment it is rarely used at all. But one could also make a point that this loss of control and of visibility is one of the greatest restrictions a horror game can have. Case in point, Song of Horror, which exactly knows how to use this mechanic to achieve great effects. Just take a look at the atmosphere the angles create. Because of this special technique, spacious rooms can always hide something more, and cramped rooms can still present everything they got, but they can also be made to look more claustrophobic than they are. Also, I'm a fan of panning shots, which you can also find in this game. It lets you dive more deeply into the atmosphere while staying detached to the action yourself. The developers have full control over the things they want to hide and what to show you, and are able to draw specific pictures that draw out specific reactions from you. And I am happy to say that Song of Horror knows how to do exactly that. Presentation-wise, the game works with a mixed bag, unfortunately. Some parts were designed with lots of love, while others were clearly not the favorite part to work on. The environmental design is just marvelous to look at. In Song of Horror, you will explore a spooky mansion, an abandoned library, even a broken down monastery is here for you to feel dready and abandoned in. And in fact, everything looks either desolate of any life, in a positive way, and or broken down by time. Like nobody has set foot in these places for ages. If you find food, you can tell that it is definitely rotten, and I don't think we need to talk about the corpses lying around at all. Not to mention the light and shadow play you can find here, which is just superb. I am always amazed to see some good shadow play. I just wish some of those details could have found their way into the character design because they look like PS2 era. Especially their teeth look like it's just some kind of grit texture they found, and the faces they make when they're scared scare me as well, but for all the wrong reasons. Sometimes it really drifts off into the comedic, and thank God it's pretty easy to ignore that once you got used to it. From a mechanical point of view, there is almost nothing to nitpick. Despite using fixed camera angles, the protagonists don't suffer from tank controls much, which is quite an accomplishment. The only time the controls were really non-responsive was when I used the stairs. Here, the control can even get reversed as soon as the camera changes perspective, but other than that, it works well. I mean, sometimes you have to shine your light source directly on the point of interest, otherwise you don't get the trigger point, but that's fine. And the characters themselves look and walk a bit tanky, and the animations may look a bit jerky at times. Okay, I'll take this serious. Jeez. Fortunately, the characters look a lot better during cutscenes, which are, I can only assume, hand-drawn. I especially like that everything is held in black and white. It gives off an ancient mystery vibe, like you just uncovered the next page of a very old tale. These cutscenes are always accompanied by some voice acting from the main cast, which delivered an awesome performance.
Again. Another Friday evening and I'm working as an errand boy. I suppose they're too important over at Wake Publishers to come looking for jolly old Husher themselves. Shit. Even I should be too important for that. I mustn't overstretch my complaints. Rising from my lot as a drunkard and financial ruin to that of an errand boy is actually quite an improvement.
So while you're solving puzzles and gathering information about how to stop the melody that haunts you and the entity that will ultimately claim you, the entity itself plays its own game. It is important to understand that 80% of the events that happen to you are not scripted. The entity is an AI in the game that will put you through random events whenever it feels like it. Sometimes it's just flickering lights to make you feel a bit uneasy. Sometimes you will see something out of the corner of your eye not even your character can see. And at other times it tries to straight up pull a character down into the darkness by prompting one of many minigames. And it's in your best interest to be on high alert at all times, because if you lose one of those minigames just once, your character gets axed. That's right, the game features permadeath to drive the point home that the entity is not playing around. If you lose a character, you need to choose a new one to finish the chapter. Don't worry, all your gathered clues and items are still here. When your old character dies, he or she leaves a bag behind that contains all their belongings so far. Your new potential sacrifice just has to make it to the place they died to pick it up, and then continue, which is the hard part. You get around 3 to 4 characters per chapter to play as, and concerning this I have some good news and some bad news for you. The good news first, from a gameplay perspective it doesn't matter if some of them kick the bucket. And now the bad news. With every character you lose, you might make the game harder for yourself. Characters can reappear and help you investigate the subsequent chapters if you're able to keep them alive. So losing a person now might cost you dearly at the later point in time. Suddenly the only person left for that chapter is Daniel and nobody else, and if he dies for any reason, then you have to restart the chapter from the beginning, no matter how much progress you made. So in a way, the game even incentivizes you to use everybody else but Daniel in order to keep your progress. But at the same time, it punishes you for treating those people poorly. That's why it's a good idea to master the several minigames. Each of them requires something different from you. For example, if the entity decides to visit you in the real world, you need to find the closest closet available. You need to hide in it, and then you need to stay calm. And you do that by pressing certain buttons in the rhythm of their heartbeat to calm them down. And at other times you need to fend off the physical manifestations of the presence with a mirror and lantern. The minigames are also made harder or easier depending on the stats every character has. Before you venture out with your chosen victim, you can see their stats, and based on that you can make assumptions about which minigames will be harder to perform. Strength will help you to slam doors shut whenever the entity wants to get into the real world, and Serenity might help you to keep calm in other situations. It's a trade-off with every character, and it might factor into your decision on who to take. However, your biggest asset in the game is not your character stats, but your own wit and carefulness. There are times when the game acts as if it would show you a quick solution, only to reveal a bottomless pit you just plunged your protagonist into. The entity roams through the game, and its favorite hiding spots are behind doors. Lucky for you, you're able to get the upper hand in this deadly hide-and-seek by simply pressing your ear against any door. If you hear weird scratching sounds, then I suggest you back off and find another way to wherever you were going.
No! Good God! No!
The entity will not stay at one spot forever. Sometimes you just need to wait a little bit or do something else and then come back. But listening into other rooms should be your priority number one. By the way, the entity also loves to throw the occasional instant death trap at you. You can find several spots that prompt you to perform a yes or no action, like stick your hand in a basin full of dark muddy water. I know that you're conditioned to just press yes in these situations. After all, you're supposed to be the hero. Nothing real bad can happen to you, right? You know what? I'm not gonna do that anymore, because over time I felt connected with the characters and I don't want to lose them. Each of them has a unique personality. They all come from different paths of life, and it shows in the way they see the world. Episode 2 partly takes place in an antique shop. If you visit that place with Daniel, then he might look around a bit and make some quips about an artillery cannon. But if you play as the daughter of the shop owner, then she will tell you at length where that cannon is from and how it found its way into the shop. The longer you keep them alive, the more you get to know them, and bit by bit you start fearing for their lives. It feels like there is really something to lose here, which makes a screw up on your part all the more tragic. Except for Omar. Omar is just annoying, and I don't even need to explain why, I just let him do it for me. Every 5 seconds, every little object gets remarked with the same condescending There is no way that this won't be hurting your nerves after a few minutes. This guy, this god-awful guy, ruins the atmosphere, the scary boner I have right now, everything, because he's not able to shut up. I wish he would just disappear. Oh, wait. Finally some peace and quiet. However, quiet is not how I would describe the music in the game. I think subdued fits way better here. The music stays in the background and is accompanied by whatever noises should naturally be around you. Clocks can be heard ticking if you're indoors, doors are creaking, the usual. Not to say that the music has no effect, it does. But the developers understand that the soundscape in total is way more effective than to just blast you with music. This mix makes it possible for the player to take everything in on an equal attention level, which in turn creates a truly ominous atmosphere that is able to breathe and expand in your mind. This way, the faintest sound you hear becomes a major event worthy of checking out. Especially when you hear some steps in the distance. That stuff will make you feel uneasy all by its own. As you can see, Song of Horror hits a lot of hallmarks a good horror game should have, and as a result, the game is genuinely scary. It presents you with a single-minded entity that you can't bargain with, you can't reason with it, and so far there is no way to defeat it. And attempting to understand it just makes you raving mad. It will not stop pursuing you until it finally claimed you. It is solely here for you. Which could be kinda romantic if it wasn't also out for everybody else who heard the music box. You slut. So my final word for this game is yes, you can pick it up without any hesitation. The random occurrence of jump scares and life or death situations is incredibly effective since you can't prepare for any specific event. This non-scripted nature will keep you on your toes for the whole duration of the game since you have to be ready for everything and nothing. The characters, even though just serviceable when it comes to the models, shine through as relatable human beings, and the voice acting of the cast drives that point home. This gem is not just for people who grew up in the 90s. Song of Horror plays like a time capsule that contains almost every element that pushed horror games into the video game mainstream, and it pays these games the respect they are due, but without being a ripoff. It is infused with enough fresh blood to stand on its own. But if you decide to pick up the game, then do me a favor and count how many references to other horror games you can find. Erica, for example, has the symbol of the Yellow King on her t-shirt. The matches you find in the first chapter are a reference to the Fatal Frame series, and so on and on and on. It pays to have played those old classics, and you will be pleasantly surprised how many references there are. But whatever you do, please remember to do the most important thing. Get rid of Omar.